to talk some Walgreens Boots Alliance ahead of their earnings release. So good morning to you, Megan. Thanks for joining us. When I think Walgreens, that comes something to mind, but this Boots Alliance, I've always had a head scratcher. Is that just like another Walgreens style, pharmacy corner store?
Yes, and I think that there's an international component to that as well, and much more of a pharmaceutical side to that brand. So when we look at Walgreens, we're mostly listening to the consumer-facing brand. So people actually talking about shopping at Walgreens or going to Duane Reade or maybe purchasing one of their branded beauty items and things of that nature. And what we're watching when you look at purchase intent is that the 90-day moving average and the 30-day moving average tell a very different story. We saw an extreme surge in demand of mentions of people going to Walgreens right at the onset of COVID as they were stocking up on things. And now I think that the 30-day moving average is really revealing because you can see that kind of drop off that after people were stocked up, they really started, the demand just fell. And the red circle that you see there, it's pacing down about 8% year over year. So a huge surge and then kind of a fall off as people started to, maybe visit a pharmacy less.
Yeah, Megan, this is a very similar conversation though that we've been having throughout this pandemic, but there's a little difference here. I see in your data that Walgreens Boots Alliance spiked up as you would have expected, but it seems to be coming down to lower levels than it was pre-pandemic. I'm looking at levels that are, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like if you take out the pandemic spike, that Walgreens Boots Alliance numbers are actually trending a little bit lower. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's kind of why we wanted to highlight this. And this is a theme that we're seeing, in peers. There's a similar chart pattern in CVS, but this is a behavior shift for consumers. I think that, there's a less inclination to maybe want to risk going to a pharmacy or risk going to somewhere where maybe you perceive other people who may or may not be sick may be going. I don't know if there's an element of that psychology at play, but overall levels are settling in lower than they were the same time last year. When we look at the current quarter, so the quarter that they're about to report, we saw levels definitely surged because you had all of that, that stocking up activity that's included in that quarter. But for the current quarter that started on June 1st, that's pacing about 5% lower year over year. So it's definitely, that's just something to watch, that it's settling in lower than it was prior to COVID.
Yeah, and Megan, I think that when you think of something like a Walgreens or a CVS, I mean, you can see as in the background, I live in downtown Chicago. And so, these kind of corner stores, the little, markets and Walgreens and CVS, I throw into that as well, kind of function as like your quick trip to the grocery store. They have some of those same things that a grocery store may have, where in a little bit more suburban areas, you can quickly drive to a super Target or a super Walmart, run in, grab those things and get in, get out. That isn't really something you can do in urban environments. And so when you start thinking about, maybe some of those spikes might have been the stockpiling that you're talking about, worried because, maybe I was used to going to a Chipotle or something after work to get dinner and I didn't have the things. I had to stock up on stuff real quickly. Maybe I chose to go to a Walgreens or a CVS. And then once I realized, well, those places are still open, you just got to order ahead and pick up. Maybe there's less of that return customer kind of going back as they realize that while there's some differences to how you approach doing some of those things maybe you're doing before to be a little bit safer, limit interactions with people, a large amount of that stuff is still open and you can still actually do that.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. I think that it's interesting too, because Walgreens even came out and said in April, I believe, that they did see a huge surge as people were stocking up and then things started to taper off. And what's important with our data is that even as things did start to reopen and as things started to normalize, we're not seeing that complete normalization. So that's just something that we've got our eye on moving forward. You can see in this chart here, the dark green bar to the far right, that's the current quarter, and it is pacing a bit lower year over year, but you can also see that huge COVID surge for what they're about to report. So I think this earnings is going to be really interesting. I think that, from a stock perspective, the Walgreens hasn't recovered or has seen this huge recovery like we've seen from other companies. So I think that expectations are pretty low. So this could be a scenario where any type of surprise, if it's not horrible, may result in a positive effect. So this is there are a lot of factors at play here from Walgreens that make this earnings really, really tricky.